Close your eyes for a moment and imagine everything you call yours. Your house, the car in the driveway, the money sitting in your bank account, the phone in your hand. Now, imagine a single breath, the one you just took. It's gone. You couldn't keep it if you tried. You couldn't hold on to it for more than a few seconds before you had to let it go just to stay alive. If you cannot even own the very air that keeps your heart beating, what makes you think you own anything else in this world? We spend our entire lives building walls, signing papers, and marking territories, convinced that the word mine carries some kind of eternal weight. But the universe is silent, watching us play a game of shadows, waiting for the moment we realize the greatest joke ever played on humanity, the illusion of ownership. Centuries ago, there lived a king whose name echoed across the mountains. His empire was so vast that it took months for a messenger to ride from one border to the other. He had gold that could pave roads and an army that could swallow cities. He spent his days staring at maps, tracing lines with his fingers, saying, "This is mine, that mountain is mine, that river belongs to me." He was a man consumed by the weight of his possessions. He believed that the more he owned, the more he existed. He believed his ego was built of stone and marble, as solid as the castle walls that protected him. He was a master of his world, or so he thought. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in bruises of purple and gold, the king walked alone along a deserted stretch of the great sea. The waves were rhythmic, a constant heartbeat against the shore. As he walked, he saw a small figure sitting in the distance. It was a child, no more than 7 years old, sitting in the wet sand where the tide met the earth. The king watched, curious. The boy was working with a frantic, beautiful energy. He was building a palace. It had towers made of wet silt, a moat filled with seawater, and tiny gates made of broken seashells. The king stood over him, his long shadow falling across the boy's work. The boy didn't look up. He was focused. He was obsessed. He sculpted every balcony and smoothed every wall with his tiny, trembling hands. For 3 hours, the king stayed there, watching this miniature kingdom rise from the grit. He saw himself in that boy. He saw the same hunger for creation, the same pride in saying, "I made this." Finally, the boy finished. It was a masterpiece of sand. The boy stood back, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and looked at the king with a smile that held no fear. "Is it not beautiful?" the boy asked. The king nodded slowly. "It is, but you know the tide is coming, don't you? In a few minutes the water will reach this spot, and everything you worked for will be gone. Why did you waste your strength on something that cannot last?" The boy looked at his palace, then looked back at the king. Without a word, the boy raised his foot and crushed the central tower. Then he kicked the walls until the palace was nothing but a heap of mud again. He did it with a laugh. He did it with a lightness that the king had never felt in his entire life. The boy looked at his messy, sand-covered hands and said, "It was never mine to keep. It was just mine to play with. The sand belongs to the earth. The water belongs to the sea. I just borrowed them for an afternoon." The king felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He looked back at his distant castle on the hill, the one made of stone and guarded by thousands of men. For the first time, he didn't see a fortress. He saw a sandcastle. He realized that his stone walls were no different than the boy's mud towers. They were just waiting for a different kind of tide, the tide of time. We live in a fever dream of acquisition. We work jobs we hate to buy things we don't need, to impress people we don't like, all under the assumption that these things define us. We tie our identity to a piece of plastic, a title on a business card, or the brand of clothes we wear. We think that if we lose these things, we lose ourselves. But look at the trees. They grow leaves in the spring, lush and green, and they hold them with pride. But when autumn comes, they don't fight. They don't scream as the leaves turn brown and fall away. They let go. They stand naked against the winter wind, knowing that the leaves were never the tree. The leaves were just something the tree wore for a season. You are the tree. Your possessions, your status, even your body, they are just the leaves. Think about the pain you feel when you lose something. The sting of a broken phone, the grief of a lost job, the agony of a stolen dream. That pain doesn't come from the loss itself. It comes from the mine. It comes from the attachment. We have spent years convincing ourselves that the world is a collection of objects to be conquered. But the truth is, we are guests here. We are travelers in a hotel that we can never truly own. You can rearrange the furniture, you can sleep in the bed, you can look out the window. But when the morning comes, you must check out. You cannot take the lamp with you. You cannot take the curtains. You leave with exactly what you brought in. Nothing. The ego hates this truth. The ego thrives on the idea of more. It whispers that you are not enough unless you have more, unless you own more, unless you control more. It creates a hunger that can never be satisfied because it is chasing a ghost. Ownership is a legal concept, a social contract, a human invention, but it is not a law of nature. Gravity is real. Death is real. But mine is a story we tell ourselves to feel safe in a world that is constantly changing. If you could truly understand this, if you could feel it in your bones, your fear would vanish. How can you be afraid of losing what you never had? How can you be stressed about a future that consists of things that are already slipping through your fingers? True freedom is not having everything you want. True freedom is realizing you don't need to own anything to be whole. The king returned to his palace that night, but he was no longer a king. He was a man who happened to be wearing a crown. He looked at his golden throne and saw it for what it was, wood and metal that would one day rust and rot. He looked at his servants and saw people who were as free as he was, only bound by the same illusion. He began to rule with a strange, quiet peace. He was no longer desperate to expand his borders because he knew the land didn't care whose name was on the map. The land was there long before him, and it would be there long after his bones were dust. Nothing is yours. Not your house, not your money, not even the people you love. They are all gifts on loan from the universe. They are here to be experienced, to be loved, to be appreciated, but never to be possessed. When you stop trying to own the world, you finally become free to enjoy it. You become like the boy on the beach. You build your palace with all your heart. You pour your soul into your work. You love with everything you have. But when the tide comes, you don't cry. You stand up, you wash the sand from your hands, and you walk away with a smile. Because you know the secret. The secret to true freedom is knowing that you have nothing to lose, because nothing was ever yours to begin with.